Today we're going to look at big publisher versus small publisher. What are the advantages and disadvantages of each? Does size matter? Is it always better to be part of a big, powerful publishing house? So a small press is really somebody like, we've looked at this before, this is my first book, The Book of Shadows, and this was put out by Snow Books in the UK, who are what we would call a small press. They put out maybe fewer than a dozen books a year, let's say, and that really marks them out as one of the smaller types of publishers. They also have other publishing enterprises that they do, as well as putting the books out. And this was the book that they put out for me first. One of the main advantages of the small presses is that they often have an open submissions policy, so you don't need an agent to approach them. But we'll look at the specifics again in a minute. So they are a small press. So sometimes when we talk about small publishing houses, we're talking about still quite significant publishers, certainly ones that have some presence on the market and in the industry. And in the US, I have a series with one of these types of publishers, and that is Pegasus Books, and they put out my Detective Gretel series. So this is a completely different series to my witch books. I publish these under PJ Brackston, so as not to confuse my readers. And as you can see, this is a completely different type of book to the witchy books. It's a real hybrid. These are comic, crime, fantasy, historical. So just about everything at once in there. And we'll talk more about these later on. But the point is, these are perhaps quite a niche type of book. They're maybe a riskier type of book for a publisher to take on. And that is certainly something that a small publisher might be more willing to do. Now, you might think, well, it would be the opposite. You might think if a publisher has a lot of money and a big staff, and they put out many, many books a year, they can afford to take the risks because the bigger books are paying for them to risk some of the more unusual titles. Well, that can happen. Certainly, I think in the past that has happened. I think it happens less, to be honest. I think everybody in business is risk averse. And small presses, or the smaller presses, have to take those risks because they don't really get the chance of perhaps the bigger names, the more commercial fiction. If they do, brilliant, but they're quite prepared to try and find new people or to take things that maybe other people are not sure of, which gives them opportunities, and it also means opportunities for the writers. And I think that is one of the biggest advantages of the small presses, is that they are there to accommodate the new and the unthought of and the book that's difficult to categorise, and certainly this one falls into that. So what has been my experience of being published by both a small and a large publisher? I think the least difference has been in the editorial process. Your relationship with your editor, thank you Blue for your input, is to do with your own working practices, how much you share those working practices, your interest in the book. It's quite a close one-to-one relationship, and I don't think that is really influenced by whether or not it's a big publisher or a small one. It's more to do with the individuals. The bigger difference perhaps has been that thing of visibility and discoverability, and I think anyone who's self-published will appreciate that. It is easier to get your work seen if you are with a big publisher than it is with a small publisher. Having said that, a small publisher can do tremendously well with your book with the right set of circumstances. You might need a little bit more good luck in what's popular, in how you get placed, in whether or not your book is picked up for reviews or by the booksellers. But certainly, you know, they can do a wonderful job with your books. For me, my experience of being published with Thomas Dunn was really basically life-changing. I don't think it's exaggerating it to say that. If you can see up here is a nice old 1910 print of New York, and that is the Flatiron Building, and a friend brought me back that print when they went to New York for a visit, and they knew how important that building is to me, and that is where my publisher has their offices. And it will always be a very important place for me, a very important connection for me with America and with my American readers, which I'm very lucky to have that. Being published with a large publisher then and with a small publisher has been good for me. Both have been really positive experiences, and I've learned a huge amount about how a publishing house works in different ways from both those experiences, both those types of publishing house. And really you need to think about, if you're offered contracts by different types of publishers, size is not the most important thing, but think about those advantages and disadvantages for your particular type of book and what sort of support you're going to need. If you get those choices, maybe those are things to think about. Keeping those relationships with people in a big company needs work. You might need to give more help to a small company in promoting your book, but certainly either can be good, and it is just a question of finding the right publisher for your book, and the right publisher for you that are going to support you as a writer beyond one book. Because as we'll look at when we talk about submitting work to publishers, they're not interested in just one book. They're interested in your writing career, and certainly Thomas Dunn were very good at that. My editor was very keen to find new writers, and that gave me the opportunity not just to have one book published, but for us to develop a series of books, and now a new series of books, and to find that readership and to reach them with my stories. So that was how it was for me.